Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Kevin Farr. Kevin Farr is based in the lovely, sunny Costa Rica, and you can find out more about Kevin Farr and his wonderful work at lovealchemyscience.com, where he is a coach. Welcome, Kevin Farr.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you again. Grateful to be here.
So, Kevin Farr, before you and I started this recording, we were chatting briefly about your history and how you overcame opioid addiction. And just for our audience, will you please share how you overcame opioids? I just think it's so critical that people know that it is possible to get off those horrible, horrible drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. If you would have asked me this question back then, I would have been like, there's no way out and death is like my only option. Um, yeah, it was, I wish I could say that it was a clean, sobering up process that went linearly, but it was very zigzag for me. My first wave of trying to get clean was 28. And I white knuckled it coming off of, I mean, I was all over the place with the opioids and the opiates, and just like type variety that I was taking. So I was multi addicted to also benzodiazepines and other things. And so I just cold turkeyed, and it was really, I was married at the time, and I was helping my wife at the time raised a child, and I overdosed. And she took a picture of me. And when I woke up, my legs weren't working because when you overdose and you fall over, it cuts off the flow of nerves and blood to that limb. And I'm panicking about my limbs, and she drops this picture on me, and she just says, "You need to get your stuff together now if you want to be if that in that little boy's life." And miraculously, my legs started working. I'm gonna cry. And it was early in the morning, and I walked into his room, and he just like woke up with this big, bright, sunshiny smile and greeted me and ran up and hugged me and just wants to like play and start the day. And then I didn't realize it then, but looking back, it was like looking at my own inner child, like my own capacity to like be a human again. And so I didn't have any recovery. I didn't have any spiritual practice. I was super adverse to 12 step at the time, but just like loving him and being loved by him was like awesome motivation. And so I white knuckled it, and I drank a lot of alcohol to deal with the withdrawals. Like I don't recommend that either. My story is not like the front end of it. It's like, um, but it's like all I understood, And I pushed all the opiates out. I had a relapse about a year later that was really small, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And then I struggled occasionally for the next couple of years with mainly alcohol, but I stabilized. Like I worked a normal job. I stabilized financially. I looked like I put my body back together, which my weight was all over the place. My organs were messed up. I had unidentifiable skin disease. Like just my liver and my kidneys were so shot from just years and years of hard living. And so I really struggled from like 28 to 33 to really get sober. And then I had a big relapse at 33, a huge drug binge, like a $10,000 drug binge. And I was sitting in a car, and the thought was like, I hate my life. I hate it. I hate my life. And it was like, all right, well, do you want to die again? And the response was like, we've tried that so many times, we can't even get that right. Like we've tried this. It's like I was like, all right, so you don't want to die and you don't like your life. Like what next? It's like, well, the question was like, do you want to live? Like, yes. Okay, so you want to live. You don't like your life. You don't want to die. You don't know how to live. No, I have no idea how to live. Do you want to get some help? Let's get some help. Like, and this was coming out of like a really big drug haze. And so I changed my life. I moved to Los Angeles. I found some specialized therapists, both of which worked at that time really underground stuff with psychedelics and other compounds. And that was when I my first sitting in plant medicine. I didn't go there to like, I need a spiritual awakening or I want to get, so it wasn't like that in my head. I had the very much like addict mentality of I'm just fix me. And then somehow I can go on with my life and just keep going and doing whatever I need to do. Right. That was the story. I drank plant medicine, cried my eyes out for so much grief, and then woke up like there's definitely a higher power. The universe is intelligent. It's a living organism. I matter, even though I'm a tiny little insignificant thing. I matter, and I have a lot of responsibility if I want to actually recover, but I can recover. And I woke up feeling so grateful and also like I didn't ask for all this responsibility of like work to do, but that's what set me about getting back into eventually like 12 step, really good trauma addiction therapists. Like there is such a difference between people that really understand addiction and trauma, especially addiction as a response to trauma, like a way of managing and medicating the severity of complex PTSD symptoms. Like so once I got to people like that, everything changed. So now I've been sober 10 years. I do work 12 step. I work two 12 step programs. I have a therapist that I've been seeing for a long time that's a specialist. I have people that I work with in my spiritual community, and a lot of my friends have come into 12 step as a result of like watching me. So most of my friends are in 12 step, and then I made new friends in 12 step. So I've got a really solid community, and like that for me is recovery. Is like I committed to a spiritual path, and then I surrounded myself with people that could help me, and kept humbling myself. And I still do this to this day. Is just like I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. And somehow that actually helps me build confidence and courage to live life on life's terms, which as an addict, that's one of the reasons we check out is like life on life's terms can be really hard. So I will pause there. Thank you for asking that. Yeah.
That is such a powerful story. And Kevin Farr, congratulations on 10 years of sobriety. And I
Thank you.
really wanted to talk to you about this just because people need to know it is possible to get off opioids. And for our audience, will you share? Because a lot of people think, well, maybe he got off, but he's not on whatever. So, which opioids were you addicted to?
So I think I'm going to back this up and say that during this time period of increasing addiction, I was also on a cornucopia of pharmacological cocktails that psychiatrists and doctors were prescribing. So, so I have trauma that no one's recognizing. They're telling me I have a chemical imbalance, so they're pumping me full of drugs. I'm a high performing athlete and I have a lot of sports injuries, and then they're pumping me full of drugs. The combination of like not being able to sustain the childhood trauma anymore, I was involved in drug dealing, I get arrested. I started mixing a lot of drugs. So by the time that was fully into addiction, I so everything from morphine, fentanyl, and I have done so much amends for my role in in the fentanyl business. Like it was just horrible. We didn't know what we were doing. I'm just a kid. Like it's just so fentanyl, benzodiazepines. I mean, ketamine, cocaine, methamphetamine, crack. I mean, at a certain point, I'm just a garbage can for everything. Even though I really prefer cocktails of opioids and opiates, and heroin as well. I did eventually become an IV drug user. Yeah, it was really dark, and I was compounding stuff. So I was mixing, I was making cocktails, and I had a physician's desk reference like in my house so that I could understand. Like I really went super deep, you know. And it was really dark. And so at the end, when I was kicking at the end, I was kicking. I was upwards of like 40 10 milligram Norco a day, which is hydrocodone. Methadone. I mean, methadone is really potent, and so I'm taking 10 times the like recommended dose of methadone, and oxycontin. Just because I just didn't have access to it. But I would my go-tos were like fentanyl and Dilaudid. Yeah, it was dark, and then I'd mix it with like methylphenidate, which is Ritalin, or amphetamine salt, which is Adderall. So I had that in my system too, and a lot of benzodiazepine. So yeah, it was like I said, like I wouldn't recommend that type of cold turkey from doing that, but it's all I understood at that time because I just like so adverse to 12 step. And because I didn't believe in a higher power, like everything was my will, so it's harder to ask for help with that mentality. But yeah, it's painful coming off these things. It can be done. It's really uncomfortable. The pharmaceuticals for mental health were really difficult to come off of as well. it really had the effect on my body. So it's whether the doctor was giving to me or I was abusing it, like they all created significant harm to my body, and they were all really difficult to come off of, but survivable. I think that's the thing that for addicts is like withdrawal is really painful, but it's survivable. And even for clients that I work with today that are coming off of just pharmaceuticals that are sober off of substances, they're dealing with the same withdrawal, and it's so uncomfortable, which makes titration off of pharmaceuticals so difficult because just the discomfort. And the thing for addicts is like we learn to manage pain with an exogenous substance. So the difficulty with coming off this stuff is we don't want to deal with the pain, but really underneath that is like we don't want to deal with the feelings underneath. And that's where we eventually have to get to, or we'll keep cycling back through drugs. Is like we have to feel and express, but we can come off all this stuff regardless of how uncomfortable it is. And when we do it, and we have some courage and confidence that like we're okay, like we can do this.
I just can't thank you enough for sharing your story, Kevin Farr. You are such a testimony for what is possible through the power of the human spirit and natural healing, right?
Yeah, seriously. Plants. There's a lot of the conventional stuff out there, like I understand why the conventions and normative behavior in the addiction industry have evolved the way that they do, but it's a completely flawed system based on serving people at volume and scale with no real understanding of the value of nutrition, of food medicine, of movement, of prayer, because it takes a lot more time and personalization. This is starting to change where there's more facilities that are offering more cutting edge thinking around a holistic way of recovery. But yeah, it's like the natural medicine is phenomenal. Like I have no idea where I would be without plants radically waking up my body, regulating my nervous system, and saying like, yo, there's hope for another way to live. Because I couldn't generate that type of thinking. My neurons and my neural pathways just weren't configured that way until I started working with plants and working with people that could train me to train my brain to think a different way. Because underneath the substance addiction is an addiction to thinking, a thought pattern. And then underneath that are the chemicals and electrical patterns that go along with that thinking pattern. That's a lot to deal with. So a lot of times as addicts, we're like, I don't want to deal with the discomfort of the substance. I don't really want to look at my stuff. And like, I don't want to do this work. And it's like, no, but life gets better. That's where things get really interesting is like, we learn how to heal naturally in our own inner body. And that's a natural remedy. Like my ability to work with my thinking changes my physiology and neurology. So I also am a medicine maker inside my body by the care that I give my body and the plants and all the nourishment and the cool mushrooms and roots and amino acids and all these different trace minerals. Like all these things are here to help the body and nourish. So now I can have a loving relationship inwards and be my and make medicine inside. And nature miraculously by the grace of God just has all these abundant medicines around us, like here for help. We just have to be willing. And if we can't be willing, then we got to be willing to be willing. Like we got to find the willingness somewhere.
I love that. And when I'm working with a client who is addicted to anything, I do a healing with them to be willing to be well, right? And there's 25 different ways you can be addicted to pain. So, Kevin Farr, again, your testimony is so powerful, and I can't thank you enough for everything you're contributing to the planet. Just this morning, I was working with a client, and she had been to rehab, and they got her off maybe half of her drugs, but not all of them. And then she quit rehab because she didn't like the food. And someone had paid for her to go to rehab, this huge program. She quit early. And then after getting out of rehab, she went to a doctor who put her back on even more medicine. And then she reached out to me because she's having burning sensations all over the body. And I'm like, you're having a bad reaction to all these drugs. They may be legally prescribed. So, very powerful testimony. So, you are a coach. So, Kevin Farr, in your professional opinion, what is the relationship between money, earning, and overall health and wellness?
Well, it's cool. It's really interesting that spontaneously we started with the addiction conversation because one of the things like I didn't I don't prepare for these types of talks. I really enjoy the spontaneity. So, when I think about money and earning and spirituality, the fact that we actually open with addiction is interesting because I really didn't like I became addicted to money and earning really young for safety. And I figured out in my house that if I wanted freedom and mobility, I needed money. And I'm in a home with no real sane, healthy boundaries. So stealing and robbery and breaking into stuff when I'm 5, 6 years old with all my friends in the neighborhood, like this is a normal way of being. And I also I'm good in school and I have good work ethic and I have a paper route by the time that I'm in like second grade. I'm like the youngest paper route kid in the city, like ever. It was a whole ordeal. I like talked the paper company into it and then carrier. Then I had them like lobby my mom because my mom was really difficult to deal with. So I share all this in that it took me a long time to understand that there actually is a spiritual relationship between money and earning because my epigenetic expression, the way that I evolved, I didn't think that way and feel that way. And even coming into recovery, even waking up to a spiritual practice, developing a knowing that there is a higher power, I spent the first 7 years of my recovery never considering what it would be like to pray around my numbers and my budget and the economics of my life. It was really baffling when it was introduced to me, and I was like, how did I miss this? How did I miss that there is a spiritual connection between money and earning? And where this eventually took me was that I, as a human being, operate based on chemical and electrical energy, right? And underneath that, I operate on this ineffable thing that some call a spirit, a soul, intuition, right? Whatever word people want to use is fine. Where I'm going with this is that I am energy. My body creates energy, and I'm also an open energy system. And there's energy moving around me. There's electrical, chemical energy all over the place. There's stuff happening. So the relationship between my energy and what I'm doing with it is evident in how I'm earning money and my relationship with money, because those are symbolic of how I spend my time, of how I give service, how I interact with the environment and people and marketplaces. These are all part of nature's environment. That's why it exists. So it took me time to realize, like, okay, like spirituality is part of money and earning, and that money and earning is a reflection of how I'm tending to my spiritual energy, where my consciousness is going, and what I'm prioritizing in my life. And once I hit that, I was like, whoa, whole blind spot in my life I feel like missing. And what a keystone to a lot more clarity of what it is to earn and relate to money in integrity with spiritually sustainable principles, which is a newer practice for me, though I've done a lot of work to get to this point, but it's still a newer practice for me.
So I want to make a couple of comments. So I'm now 65 years old. I've had my own business for 31 years. And whenever you have your own business as an entrepreneur, I'm a single woman, self-supporting, doing work that I love to do with people all over the world. You're always like, can I keep this going? Which is really kind of hilarious because I've been keeping it going for 31 years extremely well. So
Congrats.
I'm conventionally successful in an unconventional career. But what's interesting is I've done my own inner work about money. And when I started, I was actually allergic to money. You can be allergic to anything. I mean, I look back and it's really funny. And I now have an entire manual on clearing out money issues. And the primary focus of my work is health and wellness. But you would not believe how many people's health and wellness is underlaid by their stinking thinking about money. Because if you do not have a healthy relationship with money, then you're in survival mode, right? And I've had
Yeah.
clients, they literally say, I'm not making this up. Um, the stock market went down last week. Can you give me a discount? It's like, after telling me they're worth $15 million. And it's like, well, you may be worth $15 million, but you're still in survival mode, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I equate
So
that with being when we become morally bankrupt around money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to understand the way I look at it is and you mentioned energy. I always feel like this most selfish thing I could ever do is be kind and generous to everyone because whatever we put out in the world is what comes back, right? So, and at this phase in my life, I had plenty of money and plenty of business, and I do my work from a point of view of wanting to give as much as I can to really help people, to really move that needle for my clients, right? Because I know I'm already taken care of, right? Now, so
Faith, faith over fear. Everything's okay.
so not
Yeah.
only have you recovered from, this severe drug addiction. So, your description, that severe addiction, you also went from being a thief at an early age and selling drugs, which don't even get me started on that, to being in integrity and having your own business as a coach. So Farr, what are some of the misconceptions you've seen with regards to money, earning, and wealth?
Yeah. So I'll speak from my perspective since you just laid out like a really cool timeline of like crazy things that I've done is that like so the misconceptions are really dependent upon what type of belief systems we inherit in the way we're raised and the culture we come from. And then we compound those misconceptions with the media we consume and the other belief systems we start to align ourselves with when we go out in the world and then the choices that we make as a result of that. So some of the common misconceptions are that wealth is material. It's like that abundance is the amount of money that I have. It's like no, wealth and abundance is resources, right? So I have a knowing that I am an eternal organism. Like I may come out of this body, but I mean the whole universe is just going to compost me. So like there is an energetic level by which the materials and the atoms and the energy that make up a Kevin actually are infinite. Right? So and there's things that I experience that are infinite resources like love. Self-love is infinite. I can do that as much as I want. I can love myself and other people as much as I want. There's no limit to that. Doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. So where I'm going with this is like starting to think about wealth and abundance as the variety of energy and resources available in my body system and around me every day 24/7, right? And then how do I relate to those? And money can be part of that. And one of the other misconceptions I think a lot of us fall into is like the money is safety, right? And how do I, if I don't have it, how do I get it? And if I have it, how do I keep it? And that misconception for me around money is like I came from a family that came from poverty, and then I came from multiple generations of war and addiction. So both my parents get for our first education in their family, and so there's a scarcity mindset in the home. Even though by the time that I'm 3, my father uses his GI Bill from getting drafted in Vietnam to get a PhD because he's a garbage man and he's like paints houses and he's a teacher. He's got 3 kids, right? So my mom, they're trying to strategize, how to stabilize. And what that built into me is my father had a really strong work ethic, aka work addiction, right? And then my mom, I saw a lot of like manipulation, a lot of boundary issues. So what this taught me was that money is safety, and that lying, cheating, stealing, and having ethics is how you make money. This is I basically my brain just merged this together as a kid. And so I became like at the time what I thought was a pretty ethical drug dealer. I mean, I started running drugs at 14. I was really successful. I hit 6 figures by the time I was 18. And so this is what I see is like we carry forward these types of warped mentalities. And for each of us, it's going to be different. But what I can simplify this down is I'll speak because I was raised in the United States, is that the United States is built on a slavery culture, right? It's built on slavery. And so what you get from a work ethic standpoint is an emphasis on productivity and efficiency based on labor output. This trains everybody to relate their identity and sense of self-worth with work and money. That deeply, deeply inherited ghost in the machine can drive us to all have really warped behaviors and really warped conceptions about what is money, what is safety, what is earning, and what is our potential. And so for some of us, we might come up in poverty and be like, I'm never getting out of here, so it doesn't really matter. So do whatever I want. Like this is my mentality. It's like I'm going to die young, do whatever I need to do, and so if I have to steal, do fraud, like launder money, like that's just what we do because the whole system is flawed. For other people, they might react to the system and go, I have to go to college, get a degree, get a job, have the three kids, and all of a sudden they're like in their 30s and they're like, how do I have six figures in debt and a job that I hate and like kids that I don't see? So I'll stop there and say I think that those misconceptions vary for us, but it is that it starts with a flawed relationship of where safety and security actually come from, and then externalizing it on money, and then confusing abundance and wealth with the accumulation of things and stuff.
All right, great insights. Now, with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author, and we're listening to Coach Kevin Farr talk about how to get off drugs and develop a healthy relationship with money. We'll be right back. Kevin Farr. As I mentioned, I have an entire manual that I use to clear money issues with my clients. And if you're listening to this broadcast and you're struggling with addiction or money addiction, or you're just not doing all that well financially, I'm going to give you some very basic steps on how to move forward. A really good idea, first of all, you have to understand that your money beliefs are programmed before you're 5 years old. And this is all your safety, your security, your survival instincts. So what you want to do is you want to spend some time journaling. What did I learn from my mother about money? What did I learn from my father about money? And then also, what did I learn from my culture about money? Whatever those beliefs may be. So you want to start by identifying your early childhood programming, right? And then, again, I've done that work and I never talk about my net worth, but I own my house, I own my car, I have investments at Morgan Stanley. And I'm doing the work that I love. And what I notice is that so many people in natural healing, they're wanting to do these programs, give me $20,000, and I'll heal you for the next year. I feel that is so completely out of integrity, right?
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
Because when you do good work, you have plenty of business. It's really pretty simple. So, Kevin Farr, you went from being a teenage drug dealer to, having a wellness business as a
It's a trip. It's a trip.
yeah. So, how did your beliefs about money change?
Yeah, so slowly, like for me to like what you just identified in terms of, all right, let's inventory like what we learned from our parents and what did the culture tell us and like what did our work ethic look like when we were younger? It took me time to have enough stability and recovery and enough of a spiritual practice that I could safely look at that because the two carryovers during recovery for me that I were really challenging to wrap my arms around and love was that money was going to enable me to be safe and run from anything that threatened me, right? So money's how the drug money's like I started doing that because I needed to get out of the house. I wanted to get out as soon as I could. So I was like, I need to get away from here as fast as possible. So with that running mentality and and running drugs is a really good term for the fact that like you run from police, you're moving packages. I mean, I spent more time commuting to the city, as a high school than like people who work in New York City, I'm moving a lot of stuff around and that running mentality, that hustling, that grinding, I carried that right into my recovery with me. And the other thing I carried with me is that if I could have a stable relationship with a partner, it will fix all my childhood trauma.
Mhm.
So I'm not right. So getting to the spiritual awakening of reorienting with money took me time to be willing to go, something's not working, because I made seven-figure wealth young. I had my federal case by the time I was 23 or 24. I think I hit uh, prison in Mexico at 26 or 27. Right. So imagine, like, I have this big boom of wealth from all the illicit activity. I'm a high performing athlete. I'm a straight A student. I get into grad school. Everything topples. My drug addiction goes crazy. And by the time I come out of that whole downward spiral, I'm in poverty. Then I live a period of time in poverty. And then I work myself out of that and I go into business out of survival. But I'm still carrying forward this mentality of hustling, running, grinding. So I develop a work addiction, which I already really had. I shouldn't say I already had a work addiction. I just transferred it to a new line of legal work work addiction. And I just an addiction to like doing things, and it was evident in my sports training, and it was evident in my art, and evident in my academic work. And so I took all that mentality with me, and in when I went into business out of survival, I really had to make another version of Kevin. And my joke was like, I used to sell kilos and now I sell my intelligence and my creativity. I do what I need to do to survive. My goal is to live a life where I have freedom, right? So I start comporting my identity to still be like accessible in the business community, because I'm a weirdo, walking around with mohawk and piercing and tattoo and t-shirts and stuff, and but I'm successful, and I know, and I'm effective even though I have no training in business. So where I'm going with all this is like, all of the accolades that my culture told me is success in work, I hit them as soon as I went into like normal work right away. Right. And what that tells me is like, I remember being at my first job and I said to somebody, when do people do laundry? Because they're all at the freaking office all day. And the guy's like, well, I get my laundry picked up. And I was like, oh, how much does that cost? He tells me the price. I'm like, man, I'm 30 years old. I'm an intern at an ad agency. I make like $7 an hour. I'm like, I can't have my laundry picked up. But where I'm going with this is like, the culture was built upon incentivizing work addiction. So I'm looking at the culture and everybody's behaving this way. It doesn't sound right to me, but they're paying me for like delivering those results. And I got really good comp packages when working as a management consultant in design and strategy and brand and marketing and anywhere in business. I get comped really well for being a work addict, deliver results, be high performing. So if I do that, I get paid well. So I share all this in that all of that thinking where I thought that that was what I needed to do to survive eventually became unsustainable, and it manifested in serious physical issues. The chronic thinking led to like more complications with insomnia and nervous system issues, and the constant stress and being on the computer, especially when I became a CEO of my own company and we were successful, and I'm a couple years in, I start developing really bad neuropathy, and I already had nerve issues from all the extreme sports. So the neuropathy and the insomnia, my body was just like, not going to work anymore. So the wake up call for me was actually, again, doctors wanted to do surgery. I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I got on a plane, I flew to the jungle, and I went to see all the medicine people that I know. And we work with different natural medicines and different body healing techniques. And my arm at the time was crowing from the neuropathy. The atrophy was so bad so quickly, my hand wasn't working at all. And so I'm in this ceremony with elders and a woman that I work with for many years, and my arm starts seizing. The electricity's like, it's jolting and it's super painful. And I lean over to this medicine woman and I say, hey, Dee, I'm really afraid my arm, like, it's something going on. And she goes, hold on. She pauses, she leans over and she goes, remember, Kevin, your mind moves cells. Focus on the healing. So I just immediately sit upright, start breathing. I start bringing my conscious attention to my arm, and I start talking to my arm. And the response, and I said, what's going on? And my arm goes, well, it's about time, Kevin. Let me show you what your work history looks like. Let me show you how you've been relating to work and money. Let me show you what the damage you've been doing. And then it told me, like, you cannot go back to this way of life at all. And that was the opening of going, like, I need help. And then starting to look at, like, deeply look at what's going on. So for me, it was really the pain as a result of my misconceptions and flawed thinking that sounded the alarm for me to start exploring the stuff that you're talking about and we're talking about, which is we have to look at what we've inherited and how we're acting it out, and then make a decision if we're integrity or not, and whether it's sustainable and whether we even like it.
I love that statement. Your mind moves cells. Focus on your healing. And, and with
Yeah.
that powerful thought, let's take another break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors. You're listening to Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author, and we're talking to Kevin Farr. So, Kevin Farr, as I mentioned, I have an entire manual on clearing money issues because and again, even though I'm focusing primarily on health, so many health issues is the underlying core issue is actually their relationship with money, whether they're overworking because they feel like they've got to, maintain a certain lifestyle, right? Or they're just grinding themselves into the ground and exhausting themselves because of this insecurity about money. And I also find that so many people's relationship issues all go back to money because if you're not secure in yourself, and this is very common, especially among women, people talk about attachment styles. So there's avoidant, insecure, and secure. And if you're not financially secure in yourself, then so many women, especially, try to attach to a partner who they feel is more financially viable, who can give them the money that they need or want, right? And I also have to say that I have clients who are millionaires and billionaires. And just because someone has a lot of money doesn't actually mean they've healed their relationship with money. I mean,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
it's quite
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, some of my billionaire clients, I've spent half the session working with them on their relationship with money. But going back to, having this healthier relationship with money, I think there's a 40-day prosperity plan, which is an affirmation that you can say, and it's so profound, but it's a very spiritual affirmation. And among the pronouncement is, God is the source of my supply. No person, place, or business is the source of my supply, right?
Higher power is my CEO, as we say in the 12 step. And I'm in a money. I do 12 step for money issues, and that's what we say is higher power is our CEO. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we really pay attention to, doing good work out into the world, I'm also a great fan. If you're listening, there was an author, unfortunately, he's deceased, Stuart Wilde, and he wrote a wonderful book called, it's a great title, The Trick to Money is Having Some. And he started out and he was a spiritual student and he wanted to change the world and save the world and like we do when we're younger. And and then he said there's light bulb went off. He was like, well, if I want to change the world, I have to have money in order to do that, right? So for example, I make regular contributions to the food bank. Well, if I couldn't support myself, I couldn't support the Atlanta Community Food Bank, which is one of the top 5 food banks in the country, or I wouldn't be able to share with homeless people, right? So at any rate, so recognizing that God is the source of your supply and developing your own healthy relationship with money can actually transform your relationships, your interpersonal relationships with friends and family, right? So, for example, I have a client who is having a lot of sex with her partner, but she doesn't have and it's more sex than she wants to have, but she doesn't have her own money. So she's dependent on this other person. And it's undermining their relationship because she's not secure in and of herself. And I think this is extremely common. And so when you transform your relationship with money, that's going to transform your relationship with other people. And the other thing that it affects that a lot of people don't make the connection to is actually your relationship with food. All right. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, pretty much everything. Yeah,
yeah, because
yeah,
if you don't have a, I mean, so many people are like, oh, I can't afford that food. It's, it costs too much to eat well. I'm just going to eat this cheap junk food, right?
yeah,
So, and
yeah.
all eating disorders, whenever I'm working with somebody with the eating disorder, I always work on their underlying money issues because they're not secure and they don't feel safe. So
Well said.
So, Kevin Farr, you've gone from being a teenage drug addict to having your own business as a coach. What are some spiritually sustainable principles that people can follow when they want to have a healthy relationship with money?
Yeah, so I want to connect together a few things here. This is like one, it's the willingness to even explore how we relate to money, right? And you asked me earlier, like, how did I come into this line of work? And it's like, yeah, the pain brings me into this line of work. And it's not because I thought it through and planned it out. It's because I kept going through pain in relationships, pain in jobs, and I'm having success monetarily, but I'm having dysfunction and I'm exhausted and something's not right and I don't have language for it, but I can feel it. I know it. I know it. And the way to start, I find, to start developing a healthy relationship with anything is to accept that something may not be healthy, or even be willing to go, could this be another way? Because sometimes the denial system is so strong that like we need really crazy bottoming outs. Like that's for me how I learned my toolbox with health and wellness, with phytochemicals. I do have higher education. I have master's studies in human behavior and design. I've have three bachelors in religion and social work and experimental art, and I have an MBA. So those things gave me like really good training. I've worked in business, I've worked in the art industry, I've been a journalist, I've been in bands. Like I have a lot of life experience, and the combination of training and life experience has brought me into places where I could see my pain, I could see my suffering, I could see my chaos. And the thing that can be really hard for us with relating to money or anything is to go, I'm the common denominator. If I don't like the experience, some other people, places, or things, like I'm the common denominator. I'm the common denominator. And so when we have life experiences and we're willing to reflect on them, it gives us a moment of pause. When we can have a moment of pause, we can start to go, what type of stories am I really telling myself? Like this is ultimately where I hit with my company was like, I knew I wanted out. I knew I wanted to go into health and wellness as a way of life. I didn't know how that looked. And I had stories in my head that I can't make a living on the economics of Kevin, and I also thought that because I used a lot of drug money when I was younger to fuel my art and academic studies, and I worked, but I had a cover. But so I looked back and was like, I screwed up my whole art career. I screwed up all my academic stuff. This is how I have to make it. It's like I just have to do what I have to do to survive. So until I felt enough pain, I couldn't even catch that story as a motivating factor in how I'm living my life, the type of job that I'm taking, and what I'm willing to do. I'm basically self-debting against the bank of Kevin. But until I was willing to look at the signals in my lifestyle and my relationships and go like, what's going on here? Can I look at this? And even if things in our life are going great, like it's really healthy to inventory. It's really healthy to look at one's life,
So,
and
Kevin
go for
Farr,
it.
I've had my own business since I was 34 and I'm now 65. So I've done natural healing for 31 years. And for 31 years, the principles by which I've run my business are three major principles. Number one, everything I do must be of complete 100% total integrity, right? Because if you can't go wrong with honesty and integrity, right? So if I recommend something to my client, it's the best thing that I know about, the best people, the best natural healing remedies. Number two, everything I do has to be win-win. It has to be good for my clients and good for me. Because if you don't work by win-win as a core principle, then I'm taking advantage of people or I'm running myself into the ground, right? But when
Yep.
you go by win-win, everyone wins. My clients get healthier, I get healthier. And then the third principle, which is really interesting, is everything I do has to be fun.
Joy, yes.
Joy, because
Seriously. Joy.
when you're in a state of joy, you're in a high vibration, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in a high vibration, you uplift everyone, right? And it's sustainable. So total integrity, win-win, and fun. So Kevin Farr, fabulous interview. We're coming to the end. Final thought for our audience.
Yeah, I love that you ended on your three principles, and that inspired me to say, as a result of all the pain and challenges and craziness and things in my life, it eventually brought me to the place where I could clearly say, my spirituality comes first, my recovery and self care are right next to it. How I take care of myself creatively and artistically in line with nature, my service to other people in my community, and then my earning. And that my earning as well is that I made a rule. I am no longer allowed to do anything for earning that is not in line with my spiritual principles of how I want to live my life, that what I think is fair and honest of how to earn. And there were things I did in business where I like sold products I didn't believe in. So I'm like making a living, like, Febreze. Like, I don't want to sell Febreze. Like, no offense to anybody else. I just don't. It's like not for me. So I think it's that is like getting to the point where I could trust that I'm okay and I can be taken care of, and that I actually, as a sovereign being, have the right to explore what it is to live and earn in a sane way, no matter what my financial standing is. Because I've crawled out of poverty twice. Anybody listening to this is like, oh, it's you're white, you're a male, you have privilege. It's like, no, I've crawled out of poverty. Mobility is really hard for all of us. But no matter how much money we have the sovereign right to still have joy, faith over fear, no matter how much money we have or how little we have. And that it's like what I want to end on is like we all have that sovereign right as a being to have joy no matter what we have.
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. Our guest today has been Kevin Farr. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com, unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Coach Kevin Farr, the one and only. You can find him at lovealchemyscience.com. And when you heal your relationship with money, you heal yourself naturally. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.